What's going on, gaming family? This is Sega Man back here with another video. This is actually a request video that a fellow YouTuber left in the comment section in one of my videos that I did, and he said he wanted to see more of my Sega Saturn collection. And you guys know I've shown Sega Saturn games in my collection in the past, but I wanted to pick out a few of my favorite games, Sega Saturn games, because I think he might want to get into collecting for the Sega Saturn, because he asked to see more of my collection, or do more Sega Saturn collections. So I'm probably going to do more of my different games and talk about them. They might have been some you might have seen, but I'll give you more in-depth information about some of the games I enjoyed in the past on my Sega Saturn. But we're going to do a few games that I have picked out. Some of you might have seen this in my other video, you know what I mean? But we're going to do some games on it because it was a request by somebody, and I'm glad to do it, because he asked me to. So I'm going to do this for him. So I hope he sees this video, and I hope he enjoys this video on Sega Saturn and some of the stuff I have in my collection. So the first thing I'm going to show you that I am very happy that I have in my collection that I picked up a very long time ago, which is really expensive right now, because I have it complete in the box, and it was a really neat concept of how they did this game. This was the flagship, I believe, character for the Sega Saturn, and I enjoyed this game a lot. It was a very beautiful game. There was a lot of pride in this game, made by the Sonic team. You know what I mean? It's just an awesome game all around, and it is Knights Enter Dreams. This is the box version of the game that came with the 3D controller, and I'm going to take that out and show you that here in a minute. But this is a great game to add to your collection. So I think he might want to. I think he's wanting to get into collecting for the Sega Saturn. So maybe that's why he's asking to see more of my Sega Saturn collection. Probably curious and might want to collect for the system and pick it up. And if he does, kudos to him. And I hope he will do a video in the future and tell me about it, so I can go over there and watch his videos. But this is it right here. This is the 3D controller. This is Knights. You have seen Knights in previous games, like you've probably seen him in a Wii version of Knights that they have for the Nintendo Wii. That game was good, but in my opinion, it wasn't as good as the original one, which was on the Sega Saturn. This is the best, in my opinion, Knights game ever. So I'm going to show you the 3D controller. So the 3D controller came in a cardboard box. It kind of reminds you of a prototype for the Sega Dreamcast controller. So I'll even show you real quick, but this is what the 3D controller looked like for the Sega Saturn. Very round, huh? It's really cool. Kind of reminds you, kind of looks like almost like a Star Trek spaceship. You know what I mean? Or something to that sort. But this is the 3D 3D controller for the Sega Saturn that came with the game Knights. The buttons are great on this. It's a good controller. Very well. It's really good in your hands. For some reason, this part comes off. I don't know why. You know what I mean? If it was for something else, I'm not sure. But it can click back in at the top here, if I can get it back in. Like that. But it's a really cool controller. So if you look at this controller, right, and if I can reach it without knocking stuff over, this is the Dreamcast controller. So it kind of reminds you of a prototype for the Dreamcast controller. You know what I mean? So I think this is probably the baby of the Dreamcast controller, but this was a really, really good controller. You know what I mean? For the Sega Saturn. You still have your regular controller like this. This is the original Sega Saturn controller, which is made really cool, and it's pretty awesome. This one here is the 3D controller, which is pretty good also. So let me show you the book that came with it. So if you were to get the Knights game in its original jewel case, it would come in the big tall jewel case with this book in there, and it would be, you know, it would look really cool with that in the jewel case. It'd be really awesome. And this is the game that came in there with the whole package deal right here. So this was in there with it, and like I said, it is a great game, guys. So if you think about collecting for the Sega Saturn, maybe try to find this on the cheap. Maybe if not, maybe just try to find the game. But you can't go wrong with Nights Enter Dreams. It's a great game for the Sega Saturn. So I'm going to put that back real quick. I'm going to show you some Japanese versions of Sega Saturn games that I picked up in my collection that he might be interested in, or anybody watching this might be interested in. And I'm going to show you some American version games to collect for, if you wish, for your Sega Saturn. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through the Saturn games. Oh, kind of sounds like lightning out there. I think it's going to rain here soon, guys. Hopefully I can get this video done. But these are some of the import games that I got for the Sega Saturn. And the first one here is a really good game for the Sega Saturn, and it is called Fantastic Pinball. This is another great game for the Sega Saturn. It wasn't that much, but I had to get it imported from Japan, and it was cheap, but it takes weeks for these games to come, but they're very well worth it. It's a great pinball game for the Sega Saturn. It's different, you know, different boards in there. The graphics are beautiful and awesome. You know, I mean, it does remind you of like a cool Japanese type of pinball game, so it is pretty cool. Now, in order to play these games, you're going to need a memory card. This is a memory card plus, okay? Or you need, I think it's the flashback card. I found this at my local exchange for $10, and I stumbled on, didn't even know that if you have this card, it can play import games on it. When I put one of my games in just to try it out, just to be curious to see if it will work, it worked. Then I found out it was because I had this memory card plus. So I'm so glad to have this in my Saturn collection. So you're going to need one of these if you're going to want to buy and play import Sega Saturn games. Now this is another cool game I got. It was pretty cheap. It is Dead or Alive for the Sega Saturn. Now I own this on the original OG Xbox, but it was only like $5 or $6 imported from Japan, and I wanted to own it and have it on my Sega Saturn. So that's why I got it, made by Tecmo. You know what I mean? They make one of the best all-time fighting games. Dead or Alive 3 is one of the best all-time fighting games that ever came out. And if you're into fighting games, you might want to pick this up. Another cool game, it's kind of a thick case. It's really hard. It's a wrestling game that also features Wolf from Virtual Fighter. He's actually in this game. And that's one of the reasons why I got this imported, because Wolf is actually in the game, because as you know, in Virtual Fighter, he's a wrestler type fighter in the game. So I can't, it is fighting, featuring virtual or something, fighting, but that is, it is really hard. Show you some of the graphics there. It is a really hard wrestling game. I've never beat it, but I like it, and it's very challenging, and it makes you come back for more and more. It's all Japan Pro Wrestling is what it's really called. So it is a great game. I picked it up on the cheap, you know. So if you're into wrestling type games, and you want to try some different types of wrestling games, maybe try getting that import and giving it a shot. Next one I got here is called DX Third, if I'm saying it right, DX Third. It is a cool fighting game by Takara, And this is it right here. You know what I mean? It is an awesome fighting game. I actually beat it with one of the characters. As you can see, the Sega Saturn games look a little different than the American version games. But it is a great game. If you like fighting games, you might want to get into. And that's what, if you can see the characters look like a little bit. Kind of reminds you of kind of like a virtual fighter or a, let's see, what's that other game? Fighting Vipers, which is another great game on the Sega Saturn. Another cool game I got is called Golden Axe the Duel. This is a cool game. It's a fighting game from Golden Axe with all the Golden Axe characters. It's a little bit challenging, but it is a good import game to pick up cheap. If you wanted to get the American version of this, it was over $100. I think I only paid like $10 or $15 to get this imported. So I would rather get it imported than pay that $100. You know what I mean? And the one I wanted for $100 didn't even have a case. So your best bet is to go with Japanese imports. Now the next one I got here is another cool pinball game called Necromonic. It's a really cool fighting game. It's imported from Japan. It kind of reminds you of Dragon's Fury. You know, the game on the pinball games that were very popular on the Sega Genesis. I own them both. And Dragon's Revenge. It's kind of like that. It's really cool. Got pretty cool graphics. Not a bad game. And this is the game I actually played to try out. My memory card that I didn't know about that played import games. That is one of the Thunder Force games. I actually picked this up at my local exchange for I think it was $15 or $16. I can't really remember, but I just wanted to play this so bad, and I tried it out and it worked. I didn't even know that the card worked for that, like I told you earlier. But it is a great shmup to add to your Sega Saturn collection. It is a must-own if you can find it on the cheap. It is a great game. Now, these are going to be the American games that are really good and you might want to collect for. Some of them are a little bit expensive, guys. But if you can find them on the cheap, you know, just try hard to find them on eBay, you know, Amazon or you know, maybe out in the wild somewhere, you know what I mean? But this one is very expensive. It's one of my all-time favorites on the Saturn, and I played this game for hours and hours and hours back in the day, and that is Mortal Kombat Trilogy. This is a great game to own for your Sega Saturn. Now, I do have a copy of this for the PlayStation 1, but it's not as good. I mean, it's a decent game, but the Sega Saturn version, to me, outshines it. You know what I mean? I've tried it on my regular PlayStation, and it's not bad, but it just seems like the control and the graphics in the Sega Saturn version is better. The Sega Saturn was known for doing 2D graphics fighting games way better than the PlayStation. The PlayStation 1 was known to do 3D graphics better than the Sega Saturn, like the virtual games that they had on there. But when it came to 2D, man, the Sega Saturn beat it hands down. You know, hands down. So if you can afford it, pick it up. Mortal Kombat Trilogy on your Saturn. Another cool game you might want to get into, bro, that requested this video is it's an arcade hit. If you like arcade type games by Midway, it's called Area 51. Another great game. You could probably pick us up pretty cheap for maybe $10 maybe on Amazon or eBay. It uses the stunner gun, but you can also, I believe, use a controller. I do have a stunner gun for it, but Area 51 was a cool type shoot 'em up alien type game with digitized graphics in it. It's really fun, kind of cheesy, but it's a great game. Another cool game to pick up if you like side-scrolling adventures. This is really different. A different take on side-scrolling games. Kind of a cute, cool game. Graphically, it was pretty neat. Is Clockwork Knight. It is a really cool side-scrolling shoot 'em up. He uses a key as his weapon to open up things. It's another cool game to get into if you like if you want to try out Clockwork Knight. It's pretty awesome game. I've had hours of fun with that. Another one that was really good that also was on the PlayStation 1 that was pretty decent. My favorite was on the Sega Saturn, and it is Battle Arena Toshinden URA Ultimate Revenge Attack. This was another cool game to add to your Sega Saturn collection. You might be able to find this pretty cheap. I don't know if you're going to find it complete cheap, but it's a cool side-scrolling beat 'em up game. Very colorful, very unique, kind of anime-ish fighting game, but it is a really cool game. And the best, all-time best racing game on the Sega Saturn for them days in 1995, 96 era. This was a beautiful graphical game that looked just like the arcade port version, which I think it probably was, is Sega Rally Championship for the Sega Saturn. This is a must-own if you're a racing enthusiast like I am and you like racing games. This is the one to own. It is Sega Rally Championship. It is a great game that you should add to your Sega Saturn collection. I believe you can pick us up pretty cheap. Now the next one, the very last game I have here before I end the video, is my favorite shmup on the Sega Saturn. It is Darius Gaiden. Now if you can find this cheap, complete, pick it up. If you can find it complete and it's a reasonable price, pick it up. It is one of the best side-scrolling shoot-'em-ups ever made on any system. Darius Gaiden is really, really good on the Sega Saturn. Now, I have a different version of this game on the PlayStation 1, which is also really good. But the Sega Saturn version, to me, is just better. Graphically, colorful, it is very, very good, very, very well done. The PlayStation 1 is also good, but it's a different Darius game, but it's also good and has great music in it. So, by request, buddy, I hope you liked this video. You said you wanted to see some of my Sega Saturn collection, and I did that for you, man. And I might do some more and tell you some more about other games that I have in my Sega Saturn collection and give you a little bit of history behind it. But I want to thank him for asking to do this, because I am very honored to do this by request. If anybody wants me to do any videos on any type of games that I have, just let me know in the comments section below, and I will do a video on it. Just let me know, guys, all right? Sega Man out. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. And you know what I always say, Xbox for life for Sega Man. Peace, and I'll see you in the next one.